listener. Welcome to the Spooky Mo channel. Now, seeing as this is our first video, I've chosen a story from the forums of Reddit that I quite enjoy, and I hope you enjoy it too. This story is known as the Crimson Carnival, and it comes from a user named u/jgroup, and he leaves us with a message. If you find the Crimson Carnival, don't stay past sunrise. Now, without further ado, and a much anticipated beginning, shall we get into the video? Yes. Alright. So, without further ado, let's begin. I had read the list of instructions thousands of times. The Crimson Carnival can only be found by following a series of specific directives as outlined by those who had successfully ventured there in the past. Just as described by the moderators of the private online forums, I found it at 3:53 a.m. on a Friday the 13th, far out in the countryside. After a series of meandering twists and turns that I had followed meticulously as outlined by those who had journeyed to the carnival before me, the detailed instructions were specific and required pain and personal sacrifice, but I was willing to do what I had to do. My palm was still stung from where the blade had pierced it. I had intentionally left the wound undressed again. Another necessary part of the journey. Blood poured from it all over the steering wheel. This fact seemed distant and unimportant now, although I had found the place. After years of hearing about it, reading about it, searching, the build-up, the courage, I had actually found it. I turned off the engine and got out of the car. The cool night air crisp and fresh as I breathed it in. Walking towards the entrance of the fairgrounds, I saw no one else around. The outside of the place was empty and devoid of visitors, forsaken. The moon was silver in the dark night sky above. Sounds of activity could be heard from within the fair. Carnival breakers and rides, the loud of someone winning a prize, everything that would make you think it was a regular carnival, an ordinary fair. A clown was at the entrance. His face was painted bright red around the eyes and mouth. His hair and round nose also crimson. He wore yellow pants with suspenders and welcomed me, waving an oversized white-gloved hand. I approached. "Who?" he said. "I've got a surprise. It's true. Who found the Crimson Carnival? What a delight. It's you." The clown with the yellow pants was there, just like all the reports had said. "You found the place, my friend. Get inside and have some fun. Your time now and very soon will end. The Crimson Death can't be undone." His face with the toothy grin, as that of a cartoon character, all smiles and giggles as he recited the welcoming rhyme, all but the last line, which he said in a low growl. Following that, he looked serious and angry. I was taken aback. He was supposed to say, "The Crimson Fair leaves with the sun," as the final line in the rhyme. He was supposed to be the cheerful welcome clown, no scary yet. Not yet. But instead, he said, "The Crimson Death can be undone." in that terrifying, low, rumbling voice, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had made some mistake in the ritual. His upper lip quivered as he continued to growl at me. He was supposed to keep smiling, waving, and looking friendly. The dark, really creepy, was further in. All of the entrance, the carnival, was reported to look bright and welcoming. It didn't usually reveal its true form until you were well inside of the fences. I just stood there, sweating, panicking, retracing my efforts. I had made no errors, though I realized as I went through each part of the instructions in my head and pictured myself in memory doing exactly as instructed. Suddenly, I realized I had been standing there for a while, thinking, and the clown was still staring at me. The reply came to me immediately after years of study I had not forgotten. Oh wait, the cut on my palm, still bleeding. I asked the question deliberately and verbatim, word for word, as described online. All I have is a nickel. Will that cover the fee? I held up the rare coin, and it glimmered red with my blood like a ruby in the moonlight. It lets you in, it lets you through. The bloody nickel, true, 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 the clown responded. He was smiling again, and I let out a sigh of relief. Just a little different for a second, but back on track now. Nothing to be worried about. I was walking past him, and through the turntiles, looking back, I saw he was still smiling, his wide, toothy grin, and took that for a good sign, I guess. He waved his white-gloved hand at me, and then was swallowed up by darkness and fog. At least he had stopped growling like a rabid dog. After the toll had been paid, something about that had really terrified me. Not that I wasn't already petrified, but when I had ran through this in my mind approximately a million times, things had always gone as planned, according to the directions I had read over and over, memorizing them. No one had ever mentioned an alternate ending to the welcome rhyme. Was the place changing? Evolving somehow? No, that was impossible. Through all the years and all the visitors, it had stayed the same. Why would it change now? Sarah would still be there, I told myself. She had to be, otherwise this was all for nothing. I could handle being scared, as long as it meant getting her back. I had to get her back. Her absence in my life was like a missing appendage. The memories of her, a phantom limb, attached inconsistently. She was there. I could feel her, somehow. As unlikely as that sounds, I felt like with every step I got closer. The sounds rose up loudly around me from every direction as I entered the midway. First, one man shouting,
"You, sir, you look like a man who knows how to win. How about taking the toss of the red balloons?" Then a woman calling out from another stand, asking, "How do you like to win a prize? Get the ball in the barrel and take home the big bloody bear."
She pointed up, and I caught myself following her finger and looking at the giant stuffed bears, which hung suspended from the ceiling. Each one had a noose around its neck, with eyes red and bulging. The eyes looked real, though, and for a second I could have sworn I saw one swollen bare face looked down at me, pleading and terrified. Red fluid seeped from their mouths and dripped down onto the center below. I dropped my gaze and reminded myself not to get distracted. Everything here is meant to steer me from my goal. Nothing was as it seemed. Keeping my head down, I continued to walk deeper into the midway. I walked past and heard him say quietly from behind me, "She will stay here. Sarah will stay here and die and live again. Here, always here. She will stay here. You will stay here." My heart nearly stopped in my chest. That definitely wasn't supposed to happen. The carnival workers were not supposed to talk out of character to visitors. They were always supposed to stay in character. I tried to control myself, but ended up running over to him, fighting my anger and hatred and fury and pushing it down deep, stopping myself from somehow leaping over the counter and grabbing him. With all my anger held back by restraint, I asked him, "What did you just say?" His mouth opened and closed like a goldfish, but he said nothing. "What the did you just say?" I yelled out. "Right, the salt and pepper shaker. You'll get all mixed up until you don't know up from down," he replied. "No, Sarah, you said something about Sarah. I'm looking for her. Please, just help me. Tell me where she is." Been inside for half an hour. The time was going fast. The man was just another distraction meant to keep me here longer, to keep me from my goal, to keep me from Sarah. Moving on, I kept my head on a swivel, looking every possible direction, checking every face. None of them were hers. Far ahead in the distance, I saw the red, giant canopy tent at the corner of the fair. I hoped I wouldn't have to go in there. That's where all the most horrifying sights were, according to those few who had seen it and escaped. The cannibal killer clowns in their little car that drove around and stopped randomly, piling out and murdering, and subsequently devouring whoever was nearest, and then clambering back and driving off. A similar polar bear on a unicycle would cause similar damages during its rampages when it got inevitably bored of riding around on its unicycle. A chainsaw-wielding trapeze artist that swooped down unexpectedly and cut you in half before you could even think to run. And farther in, at the very center, who knew no one had seen it, only the most extreme thrill-seeker tried for the canopy. It was reserved for the most dedicated and experienced. I shuddered to think of going in there, and planned to avoid it at all costs. I checked my watch again. This was taking longer than expected. The place was drowning out every second of my time. Even the ground beneath my feet was sticky and muddy, and each step forward came with an increasing effort. My eyes darted around, looking in every booth and at every carnival worker. There was no other guest, so that made me a little bit easier. As I approached the stand with the woman that looked like Sarah, I realized he had silently followed me and now stood directly behind me with the hammer held high over his head. "She was ours," he yelled. The sledgehammer came down hard and I ducked out of the way just in time. my heart pounding. I stumbled on the ground. Off balance, I rolled away as a second swing of his giant hammer nearly missed me again. I got to my feet as quickly as I could. I backed away from the man. He began to pursue me. I turned and ran, the muddy ground causing me to slip as I turned a corner. I got away from him and found myself heading towards the giant canopy at the center of the fair. I checked my watch. Still nearly an hour until sunrise. Plenty of time. No, I can't think like that. We've wasted half your time. I've wasted half my time, and I haven't found her yet. That means I'm behind. I need to spot her quickly and get us the hell out of here. I felt myself struggling to think clearly as adrenaline took over, and something else as well. Unfamiliar feeling, like the negative recklessness of a young man, which I no longer was. I wanted to live, and yet I found myself abandoning reason and self-preservation, and more time I spent there. The more time I spent there, and yet the giant canopy tent drew me in like a moth to a flame, and I went to it, no longer looking at the other carnival workers. Every part of me was saying, go, go, go inside. That's where she would be. Looking back, I saw the man with the sledgehammer was no longer pursuing me, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe he was getting reinforcements, and that would be terrible. But feeling like a piece of iron filament being drawn towards a powerful magnet, I walked towards the huge crimson-red canopy tent. Up this close, it was obvious how massive the thing was now. Inside would be a space lit up with lights, and a full of morbid wonders and curiosities. It loomed before me, dwarfing me in size, and I realized I was standing right before the entrance, every part of me saying to go inside, to look and see what could be found within. And then I heard her voice. Try your luck at the spinning wheel. From a distance, I heard a voice repeating the same phrase. Try your luck at the spinning wheel, sir. I stopped in my tracks, afraid to turn and look, afraid it wouldn't really be her, that it would be some trick again, some attempt to stall me. But then I did, and it was her. It was really her. No mistaking it. She gave me a shaky smile and lifted her hand to wave. I walked over to the booth and looked her, my eyes filling with tears. I missed you so much, was all I could say. I missed you too, every day. I missed you, she responded. And then some other force took over, and her smile widened, like it was being pulled at the corners by unseen strings, causing her to show her teeth. Her voice changed and became that of a carnival breaker, trying to grab your attention as you pass by. Try your luck at the spinning wheel, sir, she responded. I was stunned and didn't know what to say for a second. Sarah? Let's go. Let's get out of here. Come on, take my hand. Reaching over the counter, I saw her eyes flash back to her own for a second, but then they became full of hatred and murder. She hissed at me like a cat, her eyes now crimson red. Then she swiped at me with her nails scratching my arm badly, leaving 4 long gashes. She attacked my face next, flailing and swiping, leaving me bleeding from her nails, recoiling, terrified in pain, blood pouring from my face and my arm. I was suddenly having trouble seeing out of one of my eyes. My vision was turned red and then black on that side. "Run," she said, her face turning back into her own for an instant, just one instant. "You can't save me. Just run. If you stay past sunrise, you'll be stuck here with the rest of us." And then her eyes flickered back to the crimson red shade, and I saw her laughing at me. "I can't save her. She's theirs now." Well, listener, look at you. You've made it to the end of the video. Thanks for sticking around. Till next time, see ya and have a good evening.